Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us on this beautiful sunny day for the Mental Wellbeing webinar. I'm Amy Davis, the Content Marketing Manager at Reed Specialist Recruitment. As you know, an increase in remote working as a result of the current climate means it's more important than ever we effectively manage employee mental wellbeing of our own as well. I'd like to welcome our speakers for today, Dr. Roxane Gervais, Occupational and Organisational Psychologist at Practical Psychology Consultancy, and Eileen Donnelly, who is the Business Wellbeing Lead at What Works Centre for Wellbeing. Good morning and thanks for joining us, ladies.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Lovely to be here.
So during today's event, you're first going to hear from Dr. Gervais on how we can all manage mental wellbeing while working from home. We will then pass over to Eileen, who's going to do a brief presentation on how we as employers or managers can approach the topic. We'll also be taking any questions from you. If you've got any questions as the presentations are going on, please feel free to use the chat function on the webinar platform. Right, I think it's about time we get started. So it's over to you, Roxane.
Oh, thank you, Amy. And I will put up my presentation. Okay. Thank you all for coming today. And as you see in my presentation slide here, I will be talking about well-being and mental health at work and looking after yourself. We'll be covering a few topics during the next 15 to 20 minutes. I'll be looking at mental health at work, well-being at work, looking a bit on work-life balance, and providing some areas in which you can and how you can enhance your well-being while you're at the workplace. So what is mental health? Again, this can be quite confusing for quite a lot of people because people have different interpretations of what this means. So I'll be using the WHO's definition, which is that it is a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, and can work productively and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Now, mental health is essential because it actually helps us to function a lot better and actually allows us to make better use of what we do and how we do it. And we have to promote it and we have to protect it and we have to, get better at making sure that people are mentally healthy once they're in the work environment. So what affects mental health? As you can see, there are quite a lot of various factors that impact on our mental health, inclusive of rapid social change, stressful work conditions, risk of violence. And as we know, we've had quite a bit of social change over the last 3 months, and we've had a lot of social exclusion as well, because we've been told to socially distance when we should have been told to physically distance. So we don't want to social distance because we don't want to exclude the social element, because we need social support. We need to feel connected to individuals. So even while we're physically distancing, we should not be socially distancing because we should be connecting with people because that helps to support our mental health. And we've also seen a lot of socioeconomic pressures as well over the last 3 months. So it is a stressful time for a lot of people. So we'll be focusing today on the stressful work conditions, but you need to be aware of all the other areas that can impact on our mental health. So what is work-relevant mental ill health? And we tend to typically define these as work-related anxiety, work-related depression, and work-related stress. And we tend to include work-related fatigue as we wish to it, depending on how the factor is within the work environment. But work-relevant mental ill health tends not to cover those conditions, those mental disorders, with which individuals may enter the workplace or they may develop once in the workplace that they develop that's not really driven by the work practices or procedures that are happening within the workplace. And as we see from the statistics from the year 2018 to 2019, just over 500,000 people had identified as suffering from work-related stress, anxiety, or depression, which realized a prevalence rate of 1,800 per 100,000 workers. Now that's pretty alarming that we still have that level of ill health within the workplace. And it is anticipated that mental ill health will actually increase once we get over the COVID-19 situation. So we have to be aware of how we can actually start to help ourselves to manage this well. And as I noticed, various mental ill health conditions that are not driven by what's happening within a work environment can include disorders, anxiety disorders, mood disorders, personality disorders, schizophrenia, trauma, substance abuse. And of course, your employer or employers generally have to support those with mental health conditions that arise within individuals or that arise because of work conditions, because they do have a duty of care as outlined by the Health and Safety Work Act. And if we look a bit more closely at work-related stress, because within the workplace, individuals tend to start by developing work-related stress that can then further develop into work-related anxiety, work-related depression, or can cause work-related fatigue. So it is a negative reaction to various work stresses, and it can happen and it occurs when a physical, mental, or emotional factor causes bodily or mental tension. So it affects both our physical state and also our mental state. And because the Health and Safety Executive is the regulator for Great Britain in terms of maintaining a safe and healthy work environment, we have to be aware of their definition of stress, and it is the adverse reaction people have to the various pressures or the types of demands that are placed on them. So what are the main causes of stress, anxiety, and depression? It can include pressures, including tight deadlines, too much responsibility, and a lack of managerial support. Now, these are the main concerns. And as we know, over the past few months, because of the lockdown, we've had a lot of additional pressures put upon us in terms of changing how we work, changing where we work, changing what we're required to do. And we've had these demands, and a lot of people have coped adequately and brilliantly with some of these demands, because we've had a lot of workplaces saying that productivity has increased, which is good, because it shows that once individuals are given certain demands, they can meet the challenge of doing these. But then again, if we're given a lot of demands without the adequate resources such as support and control, then that might help us to become mentally ill. So we have to be aware that it's good to get the demands, but it's also good to have the resources for us to actually adequately address those various demands. We need the support systems in place. And if you look at what is well-being, again, this is a pretty nebulous term. It can mean different things to different people. But in terms of work environment, I tend to use an affective or subjective definition of well-being, which looks at job satisfaction and involvement or work engagement, which actually benefits our well-being, it increases it, as opposed to if we're being tense because of what's happening in the workplace or we're depressed because of what's happening in the workplace, then that can adversely affect our well-being. So we have to think about the positive aspects of well-being as well as the negative aspects of well-being, and whatever is happening within the workplace can actually increase it or decrease it. So why do we need to focus on well-being? As we all know, work is good for people, and even more importantly, good work is good for people. So being at work actually helps our health and coping mechanisms. But if we enjoy what we do, if it's a good work, it's a work that actually provides satisfaction, that can then influence our life satisfaction, which again increases our well-being within the workplace and also outside of the workplace. But good work is even better for us because it means that we're enjoying it. It develops, it helps us to develop, it helps us to function better. Then that actually promotes our well-being to a greater extent. So what contributes to well-being? As you see, the various reasons listed there, and current employment security, which has arisen during the lockdown, because we know a lot of employees have been furloughed who may not get their jobs back. People have lost their jobs. People have not been able to earn a living, such as hairdressers and all these micro businesses that exist within the work environment. So we are in a situation where a lot of what's happening within the lockdown is actually adversely affecting our well-being. Health, again, coronavirus is a disease that can be fatal. Again, some of our health has been compromised. Skills development. We might be developing because we've been given different challenges to meet during the lockdown. But for some people who've not been given these challenges, they might be in a situation where they feel a bit lost at present. And again, what contributes to well-being is making sure that the work and non-life aspects of our lives are actually connected. And again, because we've got caring responsibilities, we've got parents have been asked to, homeschool their kids. So the reconciliation of work and non-working life might be a bit stretched at the present time. So we have to think about how best can we manage that. We're going to look a bit at the management standards, which is based on the work-related stress management standards approach developed by the Health and Safety Executive. Now, these standards, 6 standards as are listed here, are part of the whole model of the management standards approach. And a lot of research over the last 30 to 50 years have shown that, these factors as listed are the ones that actually focus on actually enhancing our mental health or decreasing our mental health. So demands, control, support, relationships, role, and change. If there are too many demands without the adequate control and support, then that will drive us to succumb to work-related stress. Again, are the relationships positive? Is it a bullying environment? Is it a supportive environment? If it's negative, then we can suffer from stress. What about our role? Is our role clear enough so that we know exactly what we need to do and when we need to do it? And again, because of the lockdown, our roles might be a bit skewed at present because we might be asked to take on a different role, might be doing it differently, might be working in a different team. So there might be a lot of unclarity around now for a lot of individuals at present. And again, organizational change. And as we've seen over the last 3 months or so, we have had a lot of organizational change that has cut across size of organization, industry, sector. So everyone has had to make some element of change. How is that being managed? Some organizations have been managing it brilliantly. Others have been struggling a bit. But, all of these factors, and because we've had, during the lockdown, we've had impact from all of these various factors. So some people might be handling a lot better than others, but we have to be aware, if we're finding a challenge, what can we do about it? So in terms of, as individuals addressing work-related stress, now these 6 factors are ones that should be managed at the organizational level. So your organization should be actually supporting you in defining what your workload is like, giving you the control. But if that's not happening, as an individual, you're also responsible for looking after yourself. So if you've got too many things, you're being asked to do too many tasks, you can negotiate, okay, what is feasible and what is not. Can you then recommend how you can do the task and when you can do it? If you're not being given the control, what can you control? What aspects of your job can you control? And focus on what is meaningful and, progress those things while taking account that you have to do everything else. Poor relationships. You need to ensure that inside and out of the work environment, you've got supportive relationships, And if you have challenging relationships, keep it professional and be aware that it is a challenge and how you can best manage it. In terms of poor support, again, request support, because we have to be a lot more proactive in these times. We have to say, this is what I need. And because it's a legal requirement, your employer should be supporting you in actually meeting all these needs. If you've got an undefined role, and some people might have that at present time, raise this with your line manager and work together to really find a role. Poor change management. Is the communication what it should be? Do you think you need more communication? What can you contribute to the change? And because you're in a specific role and you know what is needed in that role, you can say, well, this is what I think should be happening within this role. Can I, would you allow me to do this way, rather than just waiting and becoming a lot more stressed because you think you don't have the control to actually make changes yourself. Now, a bit on work-life balance. Now, this has been proposed a few years ago, where some researchers are saying, do we need work-life balance, or do we need work-life integration? Because, because how we connect, especially during the lockdown, we have a lot of, the IT function being connected to the computer, to the tablets, to the mobile phones, the smartphones. But is that actually giving us balance? Because we might love what we do, which is good, because we love doing what we do. And if we have to work at what we do, that is positive. But if everything is just blurring into one day where you're on the computer for like 10, 12, 15 hours, again, that's not helpful for your well-being, because we do need difference. We do need distinct things in our lives that can actually take us away from actually how we connect within the workplace. So while we might want to integrate work, we need to realize that we do need to step away at times and think about, okay, what else do I need in my life? Because if we're working with a computer, we're home, we're on the computer, we're playing on the computer, that's not really integration. That's a bit of absorption that we might need to think, okay, I need to step away at some point in time. So again, we have to invest in self-care because that's up to us to do. And we all know the 6 areas listed. We need the sleep, we need the physical activity, we need to eat healthily, and we also not need to ruminate, because ruminating occurs when something adverse has happened to us and we keep thinking about it a lot. And because we keep thinking and ruminating on it, we're not allowing ourselves to relax, to step back, to, just release the body. So we need to realize we need to not ruminate as much as we can do if we're becoming very stressed. We have to be aware of self-compassion. Be selfish. If you want to take 15, 20 minutes, an hour out of the day, just do what you want, just do it. Don't worry about it, because it's about your well-being and your mental health. And the next couple of slides, I'm going to go a bit more into sleep and also physical activity, because these two characteristics have a lot of impact on mental health, especially, and well-being. We all know we need to sleep the adequate amount of time. This will differ for some people. Some people can function well 6 hours, some people need 8, 9 hours, which is fine. So the quantity of sleep is important, but also the quality of sleep. If it's not deep, restful sleep that allows our brain to start, shut down and restart itself and the body to release, then that can impact on our well-being. So you need the quantity sleep, but you also need the quality sleep. And you get quality sleep as well by not ruminating, by allowing the body to relax and get into deep, restful sleep. And it's very difficult to replace sleep that is lost through sleep deprivation. So if you think, okay, I've been sleeping 2-3 hours Monday to Friday, if you work on a weekly basis, and I'll catch up and sleep on the weekend, that doesn't really work, because while you may get a bit more sleep, it's not really allowing our body to, start to repair itself as it needs to do if we didn't have consistent sleep over 7 days rather than 5 days of 4 hours and then 2 days of 12 hours, because the body is not responding as we would do if we had 7 days of 6 to 8 hours. Again, poor sleep is bad for business. It reduces performance, productivity. It allows us to, not be able to assess situations adequately. So it can lead to more work injuries. It can lead to more errors. It can lead to us gaining weight, more susceptible to colds and flus again. It reduces the ability to fight infection, especially when these COVID-19 times. We have to be aware that we have to make sure that the body is not more susceptible to actually contracting the coronavirus. So, we have to take care and get enough sleep as well. And again, we have the relationships, which shows that poor sleep increases fatigue, then fatigue can lead to depression. And then when we're depressed, we're not able to sleep as well. So everything is, connected, and we have to be aware of these relationships. We also have to focus on movement. Again, we have to move, whether it's like walking, running, doing yoga, doing Pilates, whatever you need to do, because it can have a lot of benefits in balancing with life, because once we're a lot more healthier in our body, then we can think differently and we can cope a lot better as well. So again, we have to be more aware of ruminating. Are we doing it? Why are we doing it? How can we release it? Poor sleep patterns, mood, use of IT. We need to step away from it. Step away from work and step away from technology. Just take a time out. Be selfish. Look after yourself. And again, how can we increase well-being? We have to do valued and enjoyable activities. We need to have fun, enjoy work, enjoy life. Sometimes it's not going to be easy, as we found out during the lockdown. It can be a bit challenging. We might not have the resources in place to work as effectively as we would do, but we've been managing. Once you can manage that, you can manage other aspects of your life as well. Enjoy life, enjoy work, look for the fun side of things. And if you do have a challenge, figure out how best to reduce it, how best to address the challenges that you're getting. And I put a link there to a toolkit that is on the Society of Occupational Medicine's website that gives you a bit more tips as to what you can do as an individual, what you can ask your employer to do as well. And thank you for listening and attending today.
Thank you very, very much, Roxane. Sorry, I've got some technical difficulties with my camera. So that was really, really good. And now it's time for you, Eileen. Are you ready? Eileen, I think you need to unmute yourself.
Help. Yep, that's not technical hitch, that's human error. Right, obviously needed more sleep last night. Thank you, Roxane. That was great. And certainly some points in my presentation will actually build on what Roxane was talking about as well. So today I'm representing the What Works Centre for Wellbeing. So just a little bit about who we are. We are a community interest company, and quite simply we have a vision to improve wellbeing year on year, both of people and communities, but also to reduce the inequalities when it comes to wellbeing as well. So we do that essentially by developing and sharing evidence of what works when it comes to wellbeing, and we put that evidence into the hands of decision makers so they can make the right decisions, the right investments going forward. And a lot of that work is both with business and also with policymakers. And we work with a whole host of different academic bodies around the UK, and we are currently funded by the Big Lottery. But what I want to do first is just ask that really, really important question. How are you doing? And I think one of the most challenging aspects of mental well-being is that people are super good at hiding when they don't feel okay. Despite the fact that we keep saying it's okay not to be okay, people are still hiding how they feel, and that is probably one of our biggest challenges when it comes to improving it. If we don't know when people are struggling, then there is little we can do to support. But obviously, coming from an evidence point of view, what I want to do first off is just share some of the statistics around our current state of wellbeing. So this is from the Office of National Statistics. This is the UK's largest and independent producer of official statistics, and is actually the recognised national statistical institution for the UK. Now, they've been monitoring life satisfaction, wellbeing for over 4 years, and they do that on an annual basis. During the pandemic, they've actually been doing it on a weekly basis. And what they have been trying to do is measure the impact of the virus, both on our wellbeing and also the impact it's having on our lives. So what do we see in this graph? Well, we only see 2 of their measures. They measure 4 on an annual basis, but also weekly. Life satisfaction, feeling that there is purpose in our lives, worthwhile, happiness, and also our levels of anxiety. So those are kind of the 4 measures of wellbeing. And as you will see, we hit a real dip as lockdown was brought in. So we're looking at about the equivalent of 19 million adults in Great Britain reported higher levels of anxiety. That is a very, very sharp elevation. So between 20th and 30th of March, almost half of people reported higher anxiety. That was an average, their score was 5.2 out of 10, when normally it's about 3. It certainly was in the last quarter of 2019. And nearly half of adults said that the coronavirus had negatively impacted them. And that statistic was taken from the 3rd and the 10th of May. So we're seeing some really significant impact of the virus. This is on top of fairly significant statistics already. So Accenture did a really comprehensive survey published in 2018 that said 90% of us will be touched in some way at some point by mental health issues. And actually, I was reading an article on LinkedIn that was quoting the Lancet that said that experts are predicting a global pandemic of mental health to follow the pandemic we're in. So why is it? Well, Roxane certainly covered some of the work-based challenges that have caused these statistics to dip and to rise with anxiety. But actually, we're also very concerned about the health of family members. Maybe we have some financial worries, maybe our own health, maybe actually just being stuck at home with family members. And we know there's been an increase in domestic violence. So there's a whole host of different factors that are impacting our well-being. Now, if you are working from home, or maybe you've got reduced hours or you're furloughed, significant issue, because we get an awful lot from work. 30% of people say that work is actually a coping strategy. But of course, it isn't just about financial security and routine. We get a lot of our purpose, our identity, support and social connection when we're at work. And I think what's really important to consider is those who have been furloughed, and we know there are something like 6.8 million workers furloughed, 81% of them also are living with the fear of future redundancy. And some of that fear obviously is well founded. So if you're not in work, you may feel excluded and feel not connected with work, and that's going to awaken feelings that actually are suggestive of threat, social pain. And when those feelings are activated, that is akin to physical pain. It's almost like feeling a physical pain. So just to pause for one moment and think about a time when you were at your absolute best. How did it feel? Who were you with, maybe? And what was contributing to that feeling? I would imagine that you can probably map some of the reasons for that feeling to these factors here. Now, this actually comes from a report by the Department for Business, Innovation and Skills that they brought out in 2014. And these really are the characteristics of what they call a good job. And some of these factors, if not all of them actually, you can probably map against the HSE management standards that Roxane just brought up. So all of those are really key, both for the person to try and define for themselves, but also for the organisation to provide as well. Now, what the What Works Centre for Wellbeing has done is actually defined all of these into kind of 5 buckets. So these are the 5 key drivers of wellbeing. We know from research that we have done and others have done that the most important of these 5 key drivers are health and relationships. And health, of course, is physical and mental. For some, they would even put emotional and spiritual health in there as well. But critically, relationships. Those are the top 2, tied position. Close third and fourth is security and environment. Security could be emotional security, financial security, not just physical security. An environment, of course, is the physical environment that you find yourself in if you're wobbling your laptop on top of a sofa, or you're at the kitchen table when everyone's homeschooling around you. But it's also the cultural environment as well. What is the cultural environment at work? Has that been maintained while you've been in a remote working situation? And then fifth, but by no means, last position really, is purpose. And are you aligned to the values of your organisation? Do you feel that you're contributing? Do you feel your contribution is worthwhile and also critically valued? So hopefully they are useful. What I've done is kind of mapped these against what it might look like right now. So what we see for health is, obviously, I think most people would agree, it's a change in mental health. And we've seen that from the ONS statistics in that first graph. People's mental health is being impacted negatively, a lot more anxiety. Top of the scores on a weekly basis with those ONS measures has been this idea of uncertainty, not being able to plan for the future. And if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, once we've got all that kind of basic stuff to keep us safe, living, breathing, etc., we do need that element of certainty in our lives. We like diversity, yeah, we don't want every day to look the same, but we do need certainty. We want to feel our feet are on solid ground. That isn't happening at the moment. Security, certainly for those who are furloughed, it's going to be the security of employment. It might be financial security should they lose that employment. And then environment, have you been able to set up an appropriate work environment for yourself? Relationships, how have they been impacted, either your personal ones as you've been at home a lot more, or actually with your manager and your colleagues? And then purpose, as I say, have you managed to stay connected in with the purpose of the organisation? Now, I'm going to focus more on relationships. Obviously, there's 5 key drivers, but I am going to focus down on relationships, and I'm also going to focus down on the manager. And just another blurry graph, I'll tell you what it means because it is quite blurred. So this graph was produced from some research done last year by Jan Denev, who we work with at the centre, from Oxford Research Centre. If you have a look at Oxford Research Centre, there's all sorts of information on there that you may well find useful in the workplace. But you'll see the red line, anything on the right-hand side of the red line is having a positive contribution to wellbeing. Anything that's falling behind on the left-hand side, if not addressed, it can actually have a negative impact on your wellbeing at work. So just pipping the post is relationships, interpersonal relationships. That is absolutely top with 0.28. Not that the 0.2 is important unless you're a statistical geek. It's right up there on the right hand side. And what's lowest down and having the biggest negative impact is actually work-life balance. Now, normally speaking, working from home should give you a better work-life balance. But this working from home has been enforced, and it's 100% of the time. There is an optimum number of days from working from home on average, and 5 out of 5 isn't it? So relationships are really, really important, and I'm going to absolutely argue the case that the manager relationship is the most important. But before we deep dive a little bit into relationships, I am just going to have a look at some other examples with you. And I'm going to start off with commuting, leisure time and health. So some really interesting statistics I'm going to throw at you now. If you add 20 minutes, just 20 minutes of commuting time every day onto the average commute, it has the equivalent effect on job satisfaction as a 19% reduction in income. So you can actually put a monetary value on it. Now, there's a difference in terms of how you're commuting, so I'll come on to that. The effects of this additional 20 minutes is actually more significant for women than it is for men. So we have some sort of inclusivity and diversity issues there. If you walk or cycle to work and your commute is increased by 20 minutes, actually, it doesn't have anywhere near the same impact. In fact, you can increase and have almost a positive impact because people see that time as quite beneficial, a beneficial use of their time. Bus commuters, not so. So they feel the negative impacts of a longer journey and perhaps a more complicated journey than other modes of transport. So bus commuters would be more negatively impacted. However, your longer duration commutes by rail are actually associated with less strain and stress. Now, that is most likely something to do with the fact perhaps you get a seat because you're on the journey for longer. And actually, once you've got that seat, it's more comfortable. You're perhaps getting through your emails, or maybe just taking some downtime and staring out of the window. So, a reverse situation. And for those who work from home, they do have a higher job satisfaction and leisure time satisfaction. And that is because they're more likely to be able to get a work-life balance, which is critical for well-being. But not everyone is able to work from home. When you're working from home right now, is that situation ideal because of all the other factors and challenges? There is a blurring of boundaries between home and work, and also all the other distractions that are probably magnified right now as well. There is a study I just want to reference that was done in China that says about this optimum length of time to work from home. It's about 2 or 3 days a week. The reason it's not 5 is because you need visibility at work in order to have career progression, apparently, and also you need that social connection, that sort of those spontaneous meetings, that connection over stuff that isn't necessarily work related. So some really interesting statistics there on the commute. Another example I want to share with you, I've got a QR code here on here and also a link. And the reason for that is I'm referencing research and actionable tools that you can find on our website at the What Works Centre. So this idea of belonging, this is speaking to the purpose driver of the 5 key drivers. So workplace belonging is really about having shared values with the organisation. You buy into them, you believe in them, and actually the organisation is living them, and therefore you trust them. And that really creates loyalty and pride in an organisation. That absolutely gives you a higher state of well-being, but it also creates resilience. And there was an interesting study done post the recession, and they found that employees that had a strong sense of organisational identity and belonging were more than 4 times likely to have withstood the negative impacts of the recession. And that is because of the well-being of the employees through this idea of identity. They were also 4 times more likely to have maintained high levels of organisational performance. There is a direct correlation between well-being and productivity. And the researcher at Oxford Research Centre has also proven that with BT contact centres. He brought that research out last year as well. So you would also be able to find that. But let's go on to the managers. As I said, the managers, I think, are the most important of all the relationships. We leave a manager, not a job, they say. And also, if you think about some of the stressors that Roxane was talking about and how we might go about addressing those, you in the main, you will be addressing those with your manager. So you need a good manager who follows good people management practices for those changes to happen. 70% of our motivation comes from our manager. They're crucial. They're absolutely crucial. So the study that we've done here has actually been with trusts within the NHS, and what they found, those trusts that had better people management practices were over 3 times more likely to have lower levels of sickness absence, at least 4 times more likely to have satisfied patients. So depending on what your business is, read customers there. That also comes out in the BT survey, wellbeing and productivity. Customer satisfaction went up as well. More than twice as likely to have staff with higher levels of job satisfaction, and over 3 times as likely to have high engagement rates with their employees. So some significant upsides. This is not a fluffy subject. This is a real business benefit that will impact productivity and therefore will impact bottom line. So to help with some of this stuff, the What Works Centre has created a guide. Again, the QR code and a link. I think this is going to be sent around as a handout as well. A guide to the do's and the don'ts, the risks and the opportunities of putting in good people practices. And you'll notice when you read this that this isn't just about how to manage remotely. Some of them are, absolutely, but this is just about good management practices. So I would really encourage you to look at those. But I want to do a bit of a shout out to our managers. It's really important to recognise that whilst they are critical to wellbeing, there's a good chance that their wellbeing is also significantly impacted as well. They're under considerable pressure at work, and they perhaps had to decide who is and who isn't furloughed. And they're perhaps right now making decisions about redundancies. They are likely to be facing lots of different personal challenges if they're middle-aged. Let me show you some statistics around this. So the 2 graphs on the left-hand side, the bar charts, are showing you demographics, and we're looking at that B part of the bar chart as the section of middle managers, so the squeezed middle managers. And in terms of both their physical and their mental health, they are reporting lower levels of physical and mental health. The graph on the right-hand side is actually from the Office of National Statistics again. And what this is charting well-being across the entire lifespan. And I make all sorts of apologies for right now for anyone who fits that age bracket in the inverted bell curve. Right down at the bottom there, in your late 40s and your early 50s, you are experiencing the worst part of your life in terms of well-being. So if you are a manager, that might be all the things we've mentioned already. But if you're in the bottom of that bell curve, you're perhaps experiencing more debt than you really wanted at this stage in your life. You've perhaps still got dependents living at home when you thought they might have left. You've perhaps got aging parents that you're having to look after now. Maybe your own physical conditions are starting to pop up. So there is a significant issue here with regards to middle managers are already probably quite down there, and yet we're relying on them for good people management practices and to create the right cultures, the right team spirit, connection, and support the well-being of their teams as well. So these managers need to be supported. So how can we do this and at the same time support our employees? Well, the good news is there's lots of things you can do. I have circled that top one because these 3 locks mean that in terms of evidence, these are the best things you can do. Wellbeing training is effective across all different industry types. So I would encourage you to consider training for your managers, but training for anyone in terms of self-empowerment to look after their own well-being. And in terms of getting your bang for your buck and being able to sell in the business case to those who hold the purse strings, perhaps, let's talk about the ROI on some of these interventions. So we are looking at, on average, interventions on wellbeing are 5 to 1, but it varies drastically from 0.4 right the way up to 10. And yeah, you guessed it, that training actually has that higher ROI. But there are other characteristics as well which will determine the success of an intervention. And that is that it's going to be organisational wide, and it's addressing culture, stigma potentially around wellbeing and mental ill health. Perhaps starts with a health risk appraisal, so we're looking after the physical health, but that you've got information that people can access at will, maybe on the intranet, regular communications, building resilience so people can manage their own stress, maybe overall health seminars that are kind of a pulse of communication to empower people to look after themselves. But again, that line manager workshop's very, very important, and promoting awareness of the fact that mental ill health is very, very common, and hopefully take away some of that stigma. Now, I wouldn't be representing the centre if I didn't say measure what you do. You must measure. Measure to find out what you need to do, what is the wellbeing statistics currently in the organisation. You can either do that with a full-blown questionnaire, which the centre is bringing out next week, 70 odd questions that we have developed, all evidence-based, and you can benchmark all the answers to, or some of the answers to that. There's also a weekly snapshot of questions that we brought out. That's just 12 questions. And you can find all these things are free. You can find that on our website, and those you can benchmark. So by all means, give me a shout if you'd like to get the benchmark data on that, or find it on our website. But we've also got a very nifty little tool that we have developed in conjunction with the University of East Anglia, which is actually a cost effectiveness calculator. You can put in some basic details and find out what will work in terms of the interventions that you're considering. We've also created an email series, 12 emails that you can sign up to and get lots of tips and advice on how you might tackle wellbeing in your organisation. So again, another link. All these will obviously be on the handout, where you can sign up to receive those emails. So I hope there's lots of actionable tips that you can take away from this. Thanks.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Eileen. That was really, really informative and interesting. Thank you very, very much. So we have had lots and lots of questions come through on the Q&A. But before we address those, I've got a question for you both myself. At Reed last week, we created a poll on our LinkedIn profile, just asking people how their mental health during lockdown has been impacted. We received 1,199 votes when I looked the other day, and in response, 46% said their mental health had been impacted positively, 30% said negatively, and 24% of people said there'd been no change to how they felt mentally. Can I ask both of you what you make of this? Can I start with you, Eileen, first? What
Sure.
do you think seeing those results?
So the great poll, well done for doing it. I think it's so important to do these measurements. It is not going to be comprehensive in its results, which is why you've got that skew with the Office of National Statistics. Whilst it was a good poll, I think we need to rest more on what ONS is telling us. But just to sort of dig down into the whys of that, I think I would say that in the main, the 46% is going to be they're not commuting, and they've got a better work-life balance, they're more in control of what they do. All those factors that make a good quality job. And if they've had a good manager and a good leader, then they are going to have felt it, connected to the business. Those who aren't feeling good, I would say they've probably got that blurring of boundaries. They've not been able to separate. They perhaps have had challenges in personal life that has been huge distraction, not being able to get on with work and not felt connected in. I would have said those were going to be the main factors behind those statistics.
Roxane, have you got anything to add to that?
No, I think that's been pretty comprehensive. But again, as Eileen says, it's a poll that might be a bit skewed in the actual people who responded to it. So it's good that 46% of 1,000 people said, yeah, this has been good for me, because it showed that, they have actually benefited from working at home and working remotely. So I think that's a positive takeaway, that some people are actually benefiting from this, because we know the various challenges of coronavirus and also of remote working. So it's positive that people are actually benefiting from the situation.
Fab, thank you both. Right, let's have a look at some of these questions that have come in. So Roxane, not to pick on you, but it's the first one that's come up on the list here. For Roxane, hi, how has furlough affected those who have been furloughed for quite a long time?
Oh, that's a very good question. I'm not sure we've got the answer for that right now, because luckily, or maybe not so luckily, a lot of research bodies and a lot of academic institutions are actually pushing through a lot of the COVID-19 research at present time. So there have been a lot of data that has been on the process and about the disease, but we need some time to actually collect data and actually perceptions of workers who've actually been going through the pandemic and dealing with the lockdown and so on. So I'm not sure we have a definitive answer for that at the present time, but hypothetically, because people have been asked to step away from the workplace, some people would benefit from it. And I actually read an article, again, op-ed in one of the national newspapers, that's saying that some people are asking you to be furloughed because they actually benefit, because they don't have to do the caring responsibilities, do the parenting responsibilities, and actually do the work. Because especially for like single mothers and those who don't have those support systems in place, it has been quite challenging for them actually working from home. So I think, again, we don't have, but some people have actually asked to be furloughed because it actually helps them to manage their lives a lot better. So they are benefiting, but I think we still need to collect data and actually the long-term impact on this as well, because we know that some people who have been furloughed probably would lose their jobs within the next few weeks, and some have already lost their jobs. So I don't think, in some ways it might be good to help people cope, but then you've got the issue of, will I have a job when we actually start to come back to a great extent and move the economy back to where it was? So we'd have to leave the space open at present.
Yeah, uncertain times. Okay, Eileen, one for you. Chris has asked, what advice would you give to people managers to ensure the well-being of their teams whilst working from home and make sure people who may be suffering in silence don't slip through the cracks?
I think that is probably the greatest fear for managers. I work with companies in terms of delivering training and how to spot the signs, and as well as upskilling in well-being. And you spot the signs by, how they look, maybe how they're behaving. Spotting the signs right now is really hard. So you have to proactively look for them, and you have to proactively try to get that conversation going with them. So I would say that having as almost like a check-in, an audit, a well-being audit around asking them how they are, asking them, what else is happening for them, how they're finding working from home, are they managing to get enough time for themselves? But you may see it in their work. I think the first thing to go, which is why managers are so critical, is they tend to be the first people to see the signs, and they see it in their work. There's a deterioration of work. Are they working excessive hours? You don't really want people logging on and then being on for 12 hours. So you might see the sign of someone overworking because they're not being productive when they're at work. So there are ways of having a conversation with someone where you take it completely away from work, and maybe sharing your own experience of the challenges to sort of normalize it a little bit with them. But never underestimate, if someone gives you any inkling of the fact that they're not doing all right, then have that conversation with them and give them that open forum. They may reject your offer of talk to me about it, but you have perhaps opened the door for another conversation another time, or you've let them know that you've spotted it and they may go and seek support from someone else. But be proactive in asking them how they are.
Okay, perfect. That's a good call. Roxane, John has asked, do you think there is an increase in alcohol use during lockdown, which will it have a negative impact on people's mental health? In light of Boris Johnson's update yesterday, why are pubs opening and not gyms? Obviously, you probably can't answer that bit, but have we seen an increase in alcohol use?
Again, anecdotally, I think yes, but it depends on how much alcohol you consume. If it's a glass, we know a glass of red wine is good for the heart. So as long as it's not excessive, as long as you're not using it as a crutch, as a coping mechanism, it's fine to have a drink, one drink or two a day, as we know with the health concerns around too much alcoholism. And again, yeah, I do wonder as well why gyms have not been open, and pubs have been allowed to open. Again, that's a political decision. But I think we can find other ways to move and make sure that we are physically fit. Parks are still open. We can go for a walk. We can go for a hike. We can, again, because we've got benefits of IT, we can log on to YouTube, do a yoga class, do a Pilates class. So we do have other ways to keep fit until we decide how the gyms are going to open, because we do have concerns about gyms opening at the present time because of all the health concerns we have around, if someone coughs or sneezes and the droplets start to travel. So we do have the concerns, and when gyms do open, we have to make sure that people do not become ill because they're going to the gym. So I can understand why the gyms are not open, but then we do have the same concerns a bit with the pubs. So again, that's a political decision. But have a drink, don't be excessive in your drinking, and also try to move as well during the day, especially if you're working from home, or computer. Step away from the computer go for a walk around the house, have a drink, then come back. But don't stay still sitting, or don't stay still standing. Move as well. Have a drink if you want to. Don't let it be excessive. That's all.
Brilliant, thank you for that. I'll carry on with my weekly pub quiz with my team then, where we have a drink. That's good to know. Okay, another one for you, Eileen. This is a good one. What could you do if you're concerned about someone's well-being who's senior to you, your boss, balancing a very senior position in the organisation and childcare, working late, about 10 o'clock most evenings?
That sounds like a very specific question. My hunch is someone is thinking of someone. Well done on spotting the signs. I think quite often it's quite easy to miss them. So I think, great for that. It really depends on your relationship. So it's quite hard to comment without knowing the kind of relationship that you have with that person. If it's a good relationship, then I would probably approach it from the point of view of trying to normalise it. So perhaps I found it really hard to clock off at night. It's hard to shut the laptop down and really move away from it. Have you found that? Sometimes it helps. I got this from someone I know who's a sort of a living and breathing example of attempted suicide. And he said, actually, the minute that you ask someone who's in trouble for help, and actually it tends to sort of have a very, very positive impact on them. So I wonder whether, as a first step, you could ask that person for help to say, I'm finding it really hard to make sure I don't overwork in my day, and I'm finding myself still logged on at 10 o'clock. How do I go about that? And it's a powerful way of just literally turning the tables and then finding that they will then give you advice that they then need to give to themselves. It may work. Try that one first.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that advice. Okay, we've got another one come through for you, Roxane. We've got a few more minutes left, so I'm sure we can cover a couple more. Roxane, Anna has asked, companies will now move to working from home permanently as they have saved costs and operations have continued. How will this affect well-being?
Ooh, that's a very good question.
Some challenging ones today.
Yeah, I think it depends on the individual, because like me, as I always say, I'm introverted, so I'm fine at home by myself. I need a book, a glass of wine, and I'm good. But some people actually need a more rigorous, connection system, a more rigorous support system in place. So they need the team approach, they need to connect with their colleagues. And I mean, Zoom and others, Microsoft Teams and all these other visual software packages have actually helped us to keep that connection. And it's good in one way, but also some people need to be outside of the home environment to function better, because I know some colleagues again have told me that they can't work when they're from home because it's quite distracting. So I think employers should actually assess what's most feasible for the workers and for the organization. They shouldn't just put one way of working implement one way of working, because it can have some benefits. It has, lower costs, people can, manage their work-life balance. But then you've also got the aspect of presenteeism, because if someone is working from home, they're less likely to step away when they need to. And if they're ill as well, they're more likely to continue working because they're at home and they think, well, I can manage this because, I can take a rest. So they're more likely to work a lot more, especially when they're ill, or they can't function as effectively as they used to. But if they're in the workplace, you can still have presenteeism when people going into work ill, but it's a different dynamic when you're working from home, because you're more likely to actually work through ill health. And we did hear about some of the government ministers as well, even though they had coronavirus, they were still trying to function. So you think that, yeah, I can do this because I'm in a safe environment, so I'm more likely to work a lot more when I should actually be stepping away, recovering, getting myself physically well before I start back to do the work. So there are ups and downs, but we have to think exactly how best to manage it. And unless you've got a strong support system, a strong line manager who will say, step away from the computer, stop what you're doing. It can benefit, but also can actually positive well-being effect as well as negative well-being effect. So yeah. It depends on the person and the organization.
Just needs to get a good balance, I suppose. Yeah. Okay, so last question. This one for you, Eileen. Tom has asked, what are the first steps in creating a wellbeing strategy. It's a much bigger subject area than I thought. Where do I start?
It is, and I'm glad you said that, because you know, it isn't just about mental health, it is about well-being, and certainly as a business priority, it is about the well-being, because you know, there has to be a business benefit to investing in this. It is the right thing to do. I've spent 20 years working in corporate responsibility. I think this is the ultimate corporate responsibility, but there is a return on investment. So the best thing you can do is make sure that you're targeting the right thing when you put a strategy together and then implement a program. So I would start, what I do when I'm working with clients is I start with either an audit, so literally either a survey or focus groups or both. I also start with a leadership team. What do they think is happening? But what do the employee base think is happening? Because it's often quite different. And what you're trying to do is tease out which are the most, almost like a gap analysis, which are the most important of the 5 key drivers, which need to be addressed. It may be culture. Where's that coming from? Is that the leadership team? Is it the environment? Is it literally the basic physical environment just isn't working? So I think the first thing probably to do is some kind of assessment of those 5 key drivers, and then build a strategy up from there. And then, as I said, because of that sort of low-hanging fruit of the return on investment of 10 to 1 of training, wellbeing training is so effective. Have that in the program, but make sure you've got the right kind of training, targeting the right segment of your workforce.
Fabulous. Thank you very, very much, both of you. Thank you both for joining us today. I think we need to kind of close things up a little bit. I just wanted to say to everybody watching that you are going to be receiving a copy of this webinar after it's finished, and we also have an ebook that goes alongside it that we'll be sending out to you. Thank you very much for joining, and please do keep an eye out for the next Read event, which is on the Wednesday the 8th of July, called the Juggling Act, Managing Parenting While Working From Home. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining, ladies. Really informative.
Thank you.